Okay, now you should have sound for me. I apologize for that, everybody. We're going to start this back over again. So, welcome to this episode of Vertcoin Talk. This is Q1 2020. I know you guys heard your Jep there for a second, but he is joining us today from the Netherlands. We're going to be going over the Q1 update. So, thank you guys for letting us know that you couldn't hear me. Apologize for that one more time. It's always something. So we're gonna go over basically what we did for the last 3 months, and we're going to talk about in depth a little bit from the development side on kind of the OneClick Miner, because the developer for the new OneClick Miner is here with us today, and then we're also going to talk about some of the updates that we have here with VertHash as well. So we've been working on VertHash now for just over a year. We've thought we had it finalized, and then we went through some QA testing and stuff of that nature, and realized that there were some things we needed to tweak. So we'll touch on that here real quick. So first thing I want to dive into is we did do an update to the website. So the website now, when you go to the mining setup, you will see the OneClick Miner is our preferred way to have people mine nowadays, because it does integrate in with closed and open source miners, and it's really truly one click. You don't even have to have a wallet on your machine in order to start mining. So it's about as easy as it can get. And then, of course, if you're an advanced miner, you can always go through the other mining applications and then also download the core wallet to mine directly to that. We updated the website in order to give graphics on kind of how to actually start mining in a step-by-step process. Then, of course, if anybody has any questions, they can jump right over into the Discord and ask those questions. So we made that update on the website. Also, one other thing you'll notice on the website, and I'll talk about it a little bit more here when we get into the marketing section, is we did remove the donation page. So like I said, I'll touch on that a little bit later, but just wanted to showcase that here. Let's see. We also have a new update to the core wallet. So, Jeff, would you like to talk about kind of what we did with that wallet, and then you can flow right into VertHash and kind of what we're doing with that update?
Yeah, sure. So, as we do regularly, we use the updates that are applied to Bitcoin Core, which is obviously our upstream repository. So improvements that are being made to Bitcoin Core find their way into Vertcoin's wallet. Aside from the special things that Vertcoin has in terms of its different proof of work algorithm and stuff like that, but there's obviously a lot of work being done on Bitcoin Core, and we regularly update that and pull the changes into Vertcoin. Obviously, you need to there's some work required to do that, like not, especially when things touch similar areas where we've customized some of the things like difficulty adjustment, proof of work, obviously, but generally those don't update that much in upstream Bitcoin, obviously, because they don't change their proof of work or their difficulty adjustment at all, I think. But sometimes they do optimizations, or they remove like one of the things Bitcoin focuses on is trying to remove dependencies, because like every dependency is obviously also a security risk, because it's something being maintained by somebody else, and if they change it, then you can have side effects in Bitcoin itself. So therefore, they prefer not having any dependencies, but obviously that's not always possible. But they sometimes remove dependencies, and then if we still have, if like parts of the code that are special to Vertcoin use that same dependency, then obviously we have to change that around as well to make sure that that continues to work, even though those dependencies are now gone from upstream Bitcoin. We don't want to keep those dependencies around. If we can also work around it, then it's better for us to just get rid of it as well, and have the same benefit of losing a dependency. So most of this work, rebasing our Vertcoin wallet to upstream Bitcoin, has been done by hardware engineering manager. I think is his nickname in Discord. We added him to the dev team, I think 6 or 9 months back.
Yeah, this was the task that kind of he wanted to take on, right? So he came to
Yeah,
us
yeah,
saying,
he basically got in touch with us and said, okay, what's something that I can do, given his background in mostly hardware engineering, but also like embedded software. And so obviously he had experience with C and C++, which is what Vertcoin Core built in. So yeah, rebasing was a good way to both get familiar with the Vertcoin code base and also provide very valuable contribution to the project. And as I understood it, he already started working on the next update, which is obviously Bitcoin's Point 19 release, which was released a while back.
Yep.
And also that like the same process has to happen here. I think in general, this could have been released a little quicker, but obviously like everyone on the team is volunteer. We have, other stuff gets in the way. And I think we should always prefer being thorough over being fast.
Exactly.
So, if time doesn't permit to do it right, we shouldn't do it and wait until the time is there to do it in the correct way. Because obviously, a single botched update to the Vertcoin core wallet can have significant effects to the network, to people's money, to everything. So, yeah, either do it right or postpone. So it's out. It's released now. Like everybody should update. There's probably a bunch of performance improvements. There's one improvement that didn't make it into this release. Like we had some reports about older nodes. Apparently, there's still people running 0.11 releases, which it doesn't. I think it doesn't even have. I was doubting if it had Segwit or not, but I think it does. But it doesn't have the Lyra 2 Rev 3 upgrade. So they're either still mining Rev 2, so they're effectively a sort of Vertcoin cache or something. I don't know. But anyway, those nodes, when they are active, they're still connecting to the newer 0.14 and 0.15 nodes. And they're continuously requesting blocks because obviously they're behind, they're on a stuck chain, and they're trying to look for peers that have new blocks, and they just keep asking for them. And we've seen reports where they pull like a gigabyte of data per day from other nodes. So obviously that's a waste of their bandwidth, but also from the people providing the block data. So I did work on mitigation for that problem, but it wasn't in the release candidate. I built it afterwards, so it's in the master branch of the Vertcoin repository now. So it will probably be included in the next 0.16. And if you have the problem and you're ready to test this solution, then you can either build it from the repository, build your own binary, including this fix. So if you take the current, the latest version of the source code that's on GitHub includes a fix to that problem. And, the more people that run that fix, the more people are testing whether it's good or that it has side effects. Like it needs to run for a while with a number of people to make sure that it's actually solving the problem. Yeah, from what I could see, like on my node, it fixes the problem. Like I don't see any 0.11 nodes because as soon as they keep asking for the same headers over and over and over, it's going to disconnect and ban, which seems pretty effective.
So that's what we're doing. We're just basically banning the nodes that are behind as far as
like what a node would normally do is like ask for a block of headers and then ask for the next block and the next block and the next block. But here, as soon as you provide them with the block headers where the hard fork is in, like where the Rev 3 hard fork is in, they cannot verify those because they say, oh well, this is not a valid header. But they continuously keep asking for these headers. So we're keeping track of nodes that ask us for the same headers, and then if they do it like 6 or 7 times in a row, then we just ban them.
Yeah, I think this is one of the consequences of being decentralized is it's up to every individual to be able to update their software as needed, and then you're going to have people that maybe got interested in the project, but then or in crypto in general, and but they fell away from it, but the wallets are still running. They may have it on a virtual machine or they may have it on a server or something of that nature, and they just don't update it. And unfortunately, that's a unique problem with something that's so decentralized where we don't have the ability to go out and force update wallets and things of that nature. We have to figure out a solution, and this sounds like a viable one in order to make sure that you don't use up data that you don't need to.
Yeah, like it seems to me that running point 11 is useless, but I guess, somebody has it running somewhere. Maybe it's still the same exchange that hasn't upgraded. I'm not sure. Like the one that
That is
tried to
true.
ask us for money to do the upgrade, and then we said no.
Yeah,
Maybe they're still running point 11. I don't know.
that very well could
I
be
hope
true.
not, but
Yeah, I
you
think
never know.
I don't know if they're still active or not. We haven't heard any more from them once we said that we're not going to pay you to upgrade your wallet.
No, no.
So
So either they delisted us, or I don't know. I mean, obviously, I've had virtual machines that I spun up somewhere, paid for a year, ran the software, and then either lost track of the fact that I was running it, or somebody has like a Raspberry Pi somewhere that's doing this. I don't know.
mhm.
I mean, it's clear we can't force people to shut it off. They're allowed to run it if they want to.
Do you know
But at least we should prevent the rest of the network from having like these huge bandwidth drains, which is a waste.
and I don't know if this is even possible, but I was just thinking that is there a way that we could have something built into the Qt wallet by using the network to be able to send a notification? Maybe to notify the wallet user that hey, a new version is out. Um,
Yeah, that's tough because like the way a wallet identifies itself is like it's easy to fake.
mhm.
So like what would happen if I would just fork the code from Vertcoin and start calling myself point 17, point 18
Yeah.
with all the notes and say, hey, there's a point 18, you should upgrade.
That's a good point. Yep. So without a
So I don't know.
centralized server that is authenticated that can send out the messaging, this is it's just another quirk of being decentralized that you kind of have to work around, and it comes back to personal responsibility of these people being able to update their wallets and keeping up with what's happening inside of the project. And because so many times I've had people ask me, hey, we haven't heard from you guys in a while, especially now that we're doing these quarterly updates and quarterly broadcasts here. And I tell them, there's plenty of stuff happening in Discord. It's just a matter of all of our team, our bandwidth has shrunk over the last year roughly of being able to just do a lot of things outside of working on the project as volunteers, and then being able to take care of things that are happening in real life. We don't have a full-time team that's paid dedicated in order to do the marketing, in order to do the communications and the development and stuff of that nature. So we're just working with the resources that we have.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's clear. That's been the case for a while. The only thing that's different now versus like a year or 2 years ago is that obviously market conditions are different, and if you're an asset that's making people money, they're more willing to contribute, or you're more popular, or there's more people in the Discord. Like we over the last few years, we've seen the inflow of people in the community is related to market valuation.
Yeah, yeah,
Because there's more eyes on assets that have high value. So yeah, so I think I don't think it's a big problem. The other thing that I think is important to note is that we're obviously still struggling with the whole 51% attack problem, which is not likely to go away with Verthash, because obviously people can make mining markets for Verthash just as they do for Lyra 2 or Rev 3.
Mm-hmm.
But the like if we don't find a solution to this problem, then everything you build on top of the base layer it's subject to the same security problems.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say like if the blockchain is easily 51% attackable just by spending a bunch of money on buying NiceHash mining power, then yeah, you can build like a Lightning implementation, but then your channels are suddenly gone because somebody reorged them out, or you can do all sorts of funky stuff if the base layer isn't fully secure. So it's important for us to spend the time we have on that, and it's kind of boring. I understand it's not fancy wallet UIs, it's not cool mobile wallets, it's not all these stuff that we thought about working when we still thought the base layer was secure. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the reality we have to work with, and we're still working on it. It's not like we've given up. It's just there's two factors. There's one, the things we are working on aren't very visible in that sense. Like it's more network level things. Mm-hmm. And the other is, the capacity to work on this stuff is also decreased. Mm-hmm. Partly because the number of people who are, coming into the Discord and trying to help, but that was always more on the edge things, like I don't know, node explorers and website and marketing, Reddit, moderators, things like that. So that slimmed down. The development team, in essence, is still as big as it was 2 years, 3 years ago. I don't think anyone left. We even gained one person, so that's good. It's just like this type of work is very specialized, and there's not many people who understand this stuff, and thus, like the work we do, like during the day, which we're paid for, obviously has preference over hobby versus volunteer stuff that we do on Vertcoin.
And the thing is that it's not like if we are doing items in the background or so. The reality is the stuff that we are currently focused on, so VertHash, the network security aspects and things of that nature, the level of entry to contributing to that is very, very high. The expertise that's needed in order to even understand it is very, very high. But it's fundamental. It's key. It's a good analogy is that so say if you're trying to use your credit card online and there's a nice GUI into how you input your credit card information, but if you try to make the transaction doesn't go through. It doesn't matter how pretty stuff is. It doesn't matter how user-friendly things are. The transaction still has to be fundamental. And right now, the transactions are fundamental. They work, they function, everything's great, but we're trying to problem solve a specific issue, and the downside is that there is a market-driven incentive for that issue to continue being present by having people spend a bunch of money to double spend, and we're trying to think of ways to go about doing that, but this is really kind of unexplored territory because most of your thought leaders, I guess, in this space, from the sense of your Bitcoin core developer team, which is massive in compared to ours from a volunteer perspective, they don't necessarily have to deal with this problem right now because they are the majority hash rate on their particular algorithm. The problem is that the same problem that we have is in Bitcoin as well. It's just they don't have to deal with it right now. The thing is that we're having to deal with it just because we're a lower hash rate coin, but we're trying to problem solve for that, and it's a difficult problem to problem solve for, and that's one of the things that we initially set out with VertHash, is we were trying to eliminate that. But in our testing, in our in our process of troubleshooting and really wargaming that algorithm, we learned that it was going to kill some other major functionality that we were going to do inside of that. It kind of is your day-to-day, like light wallet. So the only thing you'd be able to run would be core, which isn't necessarily optimal for being able to use this as a form of payment system throughout, your mobile phones and stuff of that nature. So I think this is a really good segue right into VertHash and kind of the new final version of VertHash, because people may remember that we kind of finalized VertHash, about 6-7 months ago. We had a miner built. We were testing on the testnet. Everything was good. And then we just did some more thinking about it. So tell us a little bit on kind of where we were from there and how we got to this point, and then where we are currently with it, and things that we're looking to kind of finalize here in the near future.
Yeah. So previously the design goal was obviously to make the algorithm memory bound. So make sure that the bandwidth you have in terms of memory is the restraining factor in terms of your proof of work, like the amount of iterations you can do. The idea behind that was that GPUs have general purpose compute capabilities, and they don't stack up against specialized circuits or FPGAs. The thing that FPGAs and ASICs and GPUs have in common is like the speed of memory is like GPUs generally also have very fast memory. And so by saying, okay, you have to have this chunk of data in your GPU or ASIC or whatever memory, and then you have to do random lookups into this data. Then the speed, like the bandwidth of your memory, is going to be the limiting factor, because you can't similar to like copying data from your SSD to another SSD. There's like a bandwidth limit. There's just that amount of data that can go through, and thus by using that limit as the limit to the proof of work function, we hope to significantly reduce, I wouldn't say eliminate, but reduce the benefit an ASIC or FPGA would have over a GPU. So we're not saying this algorithm cannot be implemented in an ASIC. It probably can. The difference is that the benefit versus the GPU will be much less than with a compute-bound algorithm, because a compute-bound algorithm, if you specialize a circuit to do that computation super fast, then it will eliminate GPUs immediately, because it's so much more efficient at doing that calculation. Now, the problem with the previous version of Vertex, and like we have a number of iterations, but like the one that we spoke about, like we had a Vertcoin talk, I think in 2019 about the state of Vertex at that time. And when we were inspecting the generation of the data file, so the thing you have to keep in memory, the problem was that you could regenerate small parts of it by just doing compute. And that caused a problem, because that means that if you have a circuit that's optimized for recalculating that part of the data file super fast, then you eliminate the need to keep the whole thing in memory. And therefore, it's no longer memory bound, it's actually compute bound. Because, okay, your GPU cannot compute it as fast, so it has to keep it in memory. But if you have a chip that can recalculate the parts that you need in order to do the proof of work function faster than the GPU can read it from memory, then you lost. Or if it's more scalable, like if you can do it in, a couple thousand threads at the same time, then the ASIC is going to beat you anyway, or an FPGA. So the biggest thing that changed was the generation of the data file. So instead of the algorithm that we used for that, we switched to the proof of space. Like it's not proof of space in its entirety. It's a component from a proof of space paper that also generates a file. And it takes an X amount of time to generate that file, and you cannot recalculate a small portion of it by just like doing compute all the time. So you'll have to calculate the whole thing at once and then keep. That's the fastest way to work with it. It takes like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, depending on your hardware, to generate the file.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so by eliminating the capability of recalculating only small parts of it, it should actually be memory bound instead of compute bound. Now, on top of that, the way that the proof of work function worked with the data files also changed a little bit, but those details go above my head a little bit. So that's something that Jaroslav, JK14, is working on together with the GPU miner developer. So these are things that are, I don't understand much of like GPU development in general, but also these algorithms are, like we started with an existing algorithm for that as well. And then there's some there were some possible optimizations identified that like GPU could do less efficient than like an integrated circuit or FPGA, and so they tweaked some of these parameters to make sure that what we're aiming for is a high I/O versus compute ratio. So one iteration of Verthash, like you put the block header in and you get the 32-byte hash out. The time spent from input to output, you can divide it in the time needed for compute and the time needed for memory lookups. And you want the time for memory lookups to be the highest.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you don't want to limit the compute in exchange for being able to predict where in the file you need to do your lookups. So you still want to make sure that the positions you need to read in the file are indistinguishable from it being random. And that's why there's a bunch of hashes needed to sort of generate the indexes where you need to read from, and then you combine that into the final output. There's been some tweaks to that recently also. And as for it being final, we were here before. So I just want to make sure it's final when there's like a mainnet fork release that's out there. So where we say, okay, this is the 0.16, 0.17, whatever wallet update, and this is the block that it's going to fork at. Once we release that, then it's fine.
Yeah, and this is the thing that, unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, because everybody gets to see this build out over time. We've been very public, very open, very transparent on kind of the process and how we're going about doing this. And the majority of times that this happens, and this is something for everybody to take note of, this is nothing new, the way that this is being reiterated, looked at, battle tested, going back and making revisions. This happens a lot of time, but it's behind closed doors. You don't actually get to see this kind of happen out in the open, where with us, we are very transparent. We show you the white papers in which we're actually taking these parts of these different types of different concepts. So one of the things I have up here, I actually have the Space Mint. It's a cryptocurrency based on proof of space. This is the actual white paper where they actually talk about the section of that proof of space white paper that we're using in order to redo kind of how we're doing that data point like your Jep just talked about. And we link to these white papers, so the static memory hard functions and modeling of the cost of space versus time. So there's a lot of things here that, this is one of the benefits with our lead maintainer. He is I guess he's a graduate student now at MIT. He has a lot of resources at his hands for the latest cutting edge way to handle these types of problems. And so if you look at the development update that we did back in January, we actually linked to all of this, and we talked about how we've completely changed how this data function is working, and we link to those white papers. So I would encourage all of you to go back and look at the Vertcoin blog, where you can see the development update that happened in January, and you can read through all of this. Now, I will say right off the bat, this is extremely technical, extremely high-level stuff when it comes to how it's implemented and how it works, but it's core to the functionality and the security and kind of what we're trying to do with Verthash. And something that we've said for well over 2 years now doing these broadcasts is the idea is that you're never going to get rid of ASICs, you're never going to get rid of FPGAs. There is an incentive for people to create these, but the goal is to make GPU mining just as good as ASIC mining. So say if your ASIC costs, $5,000 to build, just to use round numbers, and your GPU costs $1,000, if the ASIC is 5 times as fast at computing, your cost of entry equals that performance upgrade. So our goal is to keep GPUs relevant and the preferable method, because everybody can get a GPU. It's multi-use. If you have a GPU in your computer for gaming, you can mine the algorithm. That's our goal, and we're using this adjustment to how things are computed and gathered in order to hash out the algorithm in order to fulfill that goal of Vertcoin. And this is proof of work. So this isn't proof of space. It's using a little chunk of that white paper in order to fulfill the proof of work algorithm that we're building that is called VertHash. And now something I have here on the screen is actually some of the tests that we've done with the 2080 Ti and the 1080. And here, it'd be good if you and I don't know if you're aware of exactly what this means, but what does it mean when it says the batch number and then also these two MS numbers and then there's a percent sign at the end of that? Can you go into exactly what that is computing? Because I see it's a compute memory ratio, but can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so that's what I said earlier was we're looking for an algorithm that has the highest possible percentage being memory lookup. So let's assume that one iteration of VertHash takes 1 second, which is because then you would have 1 hash per second. So that's not the case. But let's say, for argument's sake, that it takes 1 second. Then it means that of that 1 second, you want as much time as possible being spent in memory lookups, because our assumption is that memory lookups in GPUs is as efficient as possible, because memory lookups are the thing that they need to be as fast as possible for like gaming and rendering and stuff like that. And the type of memory on the most recent GPUs is similar. Maybe it's a generation older, but it's similar to the type of memory that's on FPGAs, like the high bandwidth memory stuff. Mm-hmm. So if out of that second, 99% is spent looking up memory, then the only thing you can improve by using an FPGA or an ASIC is that 1%. And that you have to improve it really, really good in order to be competitive. That said, like your earlier comment about like the price of an ASIC versus the price of a GPU, there's one more factor important there, and that's power usage. So
that's very true.
If you're able to have a $5,000 machine versus a $1,000 GPU, that's not 5 times as fast, but is 5 times as efficient, like in terms of hashes per kilowatt or whatever, then it's still worth it, because obviously mining, the equipment is one thing, but using the power is generally as important of a factor in your profitability numbers. But that said, these numbers indicate that it's the majority is memory bound, like it's more than 90%. So yeah, the amount that's left over to optimize by building an ASIC or FPGA is less.
Yep. And with an FPGA, you not only is the board's extremely expensive, the initial cost there, but then you have to have the knowledge to be able to code that, or you have to pay someone who has created Lord, what's it called? I forget now. Yeah, the bitstream. Yeah, you have to pay them a percentage of whatever it is that you're mining. So there's definitely a cost factor that goes into using FPGA over a GPU, whereas with us, we want the GPU to be so optimal and ideal that you basically download the OneClick Miner and you go, and it's as easy as possible, and that keeps it also decentralized. You keep things less centralized and in the hands of very few people who's controlling your hash rate. So these are, everything that we're doing here kind of reflects on our goals that we've been espousing for years now. It's difficult. It's not the easy route. The easy route would be, let's just give into the ASICs. Let's put all the power into the hands of maybe 10 to 15 people who are kind of manufacturing these ASICs. We'll distribute those out a little bit. We'll sell some of those, but we'll keep the latest ASICs for ourselves. That's the easy route to go. We're definitely not doing that. And one other thing I'll touch on, do you have any other comment with regards to VertHash, the algorithm itself, and kind of what we're doing there?
No, I don't think so. So like in the development update, it said, and that's like the current status is the GPU miner is still under development. So the latest tweak is applied to Vertcoin Core, like a beta version of Vertcoin Core. It's in my, like, I think there's a link in the dev update to my GitHub repo where it's in. one comment I wanted to make on like it happening out in the open. I think in an earlier iteration, we were sort of trying to develop it behind closed doors because we were afraid that like people would take the algorithm and run with it and then start building ASICs before we were ready to complete, or like people would, I don't know, steal it or whatever. Eventually it's going to be open source anyway, and I think our mind shifted a little and said, okay, you know what? This can just be developed out in the open. There doesn't have to be any secrets about this. If people took this 6 months ago and started building an ASIC, then great, because that's not going to work.
We've already changed it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just sunk cost. But anyway, I don't know. It's I think it also helped that people were able to look at the code, ask questions about it, because we do have some people in the Discord who do understand this stuff and who are interested in understanding how it works and why we developed it the way that we did. And I think by having the community challenge you about the choices you make, it makes for a better end result in that sense. So I think at least where we are now, everything happens out in the open, except obviously for the GPU miner development, because that's not done by us, that's done by somebody else, who eventually expects us to pay him to deliver.
Yep.
So yeah, if he's going to do it open source, then
we got to pay the fee.
That's not going to work. And I think to your point about FPGAs requiring bit streams, agreed that bit streams are maybe even more complex than GPU miner development, but GPUs aren't that easy to develop as well.
Exactly.
And like what we've seen in the past with GPU miner software is that we built an open source version, or had someone build a version that we open sourced and that we paid for. There are always people who are capable of optimizing it more, and then they extract a small dev fee in exchange for giving that away. But like we've seen with the closed source, like the Team Red Miner, and there was one for NVIDIA, I think, Crypto Dredge. There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, like they obviously invest time to make the miner better than the one that we put out. So yeah, if they take 1 or 2%, but in terms of hash power you win 5 or 6, then it's just up to your choice, saying, okay, do I want to have the open version, or do I want to have the maximum return for running my GPU? And thus also there's still a little bit of fee extraction in mining.
Yep.
That still happens, and I don't think it's a problem. Like, yeah, it's highly specialized. Like, not everybody can just build GPU miners. I am lost.
Well, I was about to say, you're starting to enter that market a little bit, because you've created a CPU miner for the Verthash testnet.
CPU miners are easy. CPU miners are easy. So many people might be aware of this, but obviously all core wallets have miners in them, because they need to be able to verify the proof, and thus they have code in it to run the proof of work function. Now, Bitcoin used to have, I think maybe it still has on like Rectest or Testnet, but not on mainnet, I think. There's an RPC call to generate blocks. Like in the early days, people would use that to mine Bitcoin blocks with their CPU. Unfortunately, that's not possible anymore. But like the RPC function is still there. So like my initial thought was, okay, let's just call that repeatedly. But it was super slow. Like it took me an hour or something to find a block, and even like the difficulty wouldn't adjust as low. So I built a small CPU miner in Go. Like the source code is on the dev update. Yeah. So if you build the Verthash build of a Vertcoin core, you run it on testnet, you'll connect to a bunch of nodes that have these kind of Verthash blocks. If you enable the RPC, you can run the CPU miner and generate blocks for fun. Like they're not worth anything. I have a ton of testnet VTC that I cannot get rid of. Like, if anybody wants one, I can send you one. Yeah. They're free. But it's just because I want to be able to test, like, if the wallet is able to process all the blocks and the transactions with this function, because we need to test this wallet update, and so far we had one GPU miner of the previous iteration that worked, that we were able to test. Like, I think you tested it as well, which is fine. But yeah, like I did the update to the core wallet, and I wanted to be able to see if I could produce some blocks, and so that's all it is. Like, it's nothing fancy.
Yeah, so this is just for testing. We're not going CPU miner as far as, the actual mainnet. We're still dedicated to GPU level, and obviously once you develop the CPU miner to test, but as soon as we start testing with the GPU miner, you're not going to really be able to find.
Useless. Yeah, yes. No, yeah, you're not going to find any.
Yep. So that's what this was for. So if you guys want to play with this, if you have any questions about it or anything of that nature, please swing into the Discord. Everybody on side of the development team, and especially Yerjep, will be able to help you if you have any questions. But it's really just for testing right now. So if you can build these repos yourself, then you should be all set there. We did have a question here. So we already answered. We're not going CPU mining. This is just purely for playing around on the testnet. And then see, will this miner be updated in the future, say support new upcoming GPUs? So when we pay for our GPU developer to open source the iteration of Verthash mining, I assume that he will do continual updates if new stuff comes out, or is it basically once we pay, it's done?
I think once we pay that it's done. I'm not sure. I think in the previous developer who created the AMD Lyra 2 Rev 2 miner actually updated it to Rev 3 without additional fee. So yeah, it's up to the kindness of the developer whether he wants to continue updating and upgrading, or that this is it. And like what we've seen before is that there's teams like Team Red Miner and CryptoDredge who either inspired or looking at the code of the open source miner that we release, they find ways to optimize it, or to newer hardware has newer capabilities that can do more or better, and they integrate it into their miner, which has a competitive advantage against our open source miner. And then there's two things that we can do. We can say, okay, if you think this performance sucks, just use this one, but you'll pay 2% dev fee, and it's closed source, so we don't know what's in there. Like, we assume that everything's on the level, but there's no way for us to check. The other option is we fundraise in the community to ask this developer to say, hey, maybe you can, improve the performance a little on these and these new platforms. In general, I would say that OpenCL and CUDA, so the platform for NVIDIA and AMD, are generally backwards compatible. So if a miner works on an RTX 1080, it's going to work on a 2080 as well. Except you might do a much better job if you use particular functionalities that the 2080 has that the 1080 doesn't. So then there's new
ray tracing cores and stuff of that nature. Like, if for some reason
so there's new cores, or there's higher limits to things you can do, and then in general they would build a new mining kernel for that specific platform to make sure that it's using all these optimizations as much as possible. But that's above my understanding. This is the level I can understand. So,
I think right now what our current, I guess, contract with the GPU miner is to build the current iteration, and then there isn't a ongoing support process with that payment. So if we wanted to upgrade to, just say for some reason the new 3 series of NVIDIA cards come out and they have some crazy features on them that we could easily, or we have an incentive to take advantage of from a mining perspective, we would have to initiate a new contract or a new negotiation with the GPU miner. So that's something that we'll talk about a little bit more when we get into the marketing section with regards to donations on kind of what we're going to do about that. But right now, this is just purely to build the current iteration with no future updating support. So moving on, we got one other thing here for you is the new, well, I guess the final version of the OneClick Miner. So can you just talk about kind of what this last iteration looks like and all of the updates that you've done since the last time that we talked about the OneClick Miner?
Yeah, there's not much exciting stuff that's added. So mostly bug fixes. There's a couple of like a couple people tested the OCM and it wasn't detecting their GPU properly, or it was detecting it properly, but falsely accusing it of not being, good enough. So, for instance, recently somebody reported that an AMD RX 560 wasn't detected, and yeah, when I looked at the problem in general is if you see an AMD GPU, like you can make a very easy test to say, does my machine have an AMD GPU? But there's AMG GPUs that are so ancient that if I then run the miner, it will say, no, I can't mine with this thing. And so my choice was to detect the exact model of your GPU and make sure that the models that pass the test are actually the ones that you can mine on, to prevent this whole troubleshooting of like, I have an AMD, but it's not mining. So there's like a whitelist of GPUs that I accept, and the other GPUs will not work. You're free to fork the repo and force it to work. But what I want to make sure is that if you pass the test, then the miner will also like start generating revenue and not start and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then people say, this crappy software does 0 hashes. Like, what is this? No money, like that. So, and like the graphic interface is based on a JavaScript framework, and so there's regular security vulnerabilities in like dependencies of whatever we use. Luckily, GitHub sends me active notifications about those. So as soon as there's like a vulnerability found in one of the packages, it will send me an email and say, hey, this package, like severity, high, low, medium, whatever. And then I make an upgrade. So the 1.0 final release had some upgraded packages, like dependency packages, compared to the release candidates. But other than that, there weren't much new things. So what I do think is interesting to mention is now that the 1.0 release is out, we can maybe think about the things that we want to have in a 2.0 release, because like software is never done. So 1.0 is quote unquote done, but there's like, for instance, one of the things that causes the most problems right now is when our inside block explorer is down. Mm-hmm. which happens from time to time, like the SSL certificate is expired, or there's reasons why the OneClick miner can't access it. And previously, the OneClick miner, which was really a 24-click miner or something, it worked really well. It had its own P2 pool node. It had its own like Vertcoin backend. And then it didn't rely on any of the central servers like Insight and P2 proxy. But yeah, in order to make the OneClick miner a OneClick miner, we had to get rid of some of those dependencies that were just hard to set up. But yeah, then you're dependent on those things. So if Insight goes down, it's not a bug that the OneClick miner doesn't work when Insight is down, because that's what it was designed. Like, that's the way it was designed. But what you could do, and that's why there's like an improvement in GitHub repo. If you think of any improvement, just file an issue and I'll look at it and I'll think about how to implement it. And because I think the OneClick miner is really fun. It's really easy. It's super easy. Like you can explain it to anyone. I think there's like, I don't know, it's not much, but there's like 55 daily users on the OneClick Miner, which is still fun.
And that's
I
people
would
that are
prefer it
sending us
being
data, though, right? Because there could be
55,000.
people that opt out of that data, and we wouldn't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So,
No, we would.
so that's something else to take note of, is that we do have the ability that you can opt in to send us data that helps us kind of understand how it's being used, if there's issues and things of that nature. So that's always. I'm sure there's a lot of people who opt out of that just from a privacy perspective, and they just don't want to send data. But
Yeah,
but yeah, if you see anything on here that, remember the one-click miner, its target audience is new people that are getting into the space. It's getting them into mining. It's getting them, used to the concept of being able to contribute to the security of a network and still be able to earn a financial benefit off of that by being able to mine some of the coins that are on the blockchain. So if you have any feature requests or things that you think may make it better, or any discussion surrounding that, please, come into our Discord server. We have that here in the dev update that you can put that in there, and we'll continue to look at things that we can do to improve, and maybe even a next version or generation that where we have some different things in there. But I think the current product is extremely user friendly, and at the end of the day, I think that was the goal, right? Is to create a user friendly
yeah,
experience that doesn't require them to install a whole bunch of stuff, and it kind of does everything for it. It's literally just one click.
yeah. I think that was the key design element. So one is that it would run on more than just Windows. So we run it
Works
on
on
Windows and
Linux.
Linux now.
Yep.
And the second one was indeed that it's like, there's always a problem if you, like, it's nice to incorporate the community and talk about, like, okay, what features do you want in this thing. That's how we did the first iteration of the one-click miner, which was very functional, and it had a lot of features that people wanted. Like, I want to be able to run my own P2 pool node, or I want to be able to find other P2 pool nodes and connect to them and choose which one I want to use. And what we saw over time is by adding more and more and more features, like what I said, it went from one click to a lot of clicks. And there were people that were asking for certain features in this one-click miner well, I took the executive decision to say no. I don't think it's a good idea, because that means that every time you start it up, you need to make a choice between this and this. So before you're mining, you have to, like, the example was like the open source versus closed source miner. So first we said, okay, open source, that's it. Then people said, yeah, but I want to use the closed because they're faster. And so, yeah, if you say, okay, we will make a wizard where you can say, okay, welcome, set up your wallet, and then which miner do you want to use, open or closed source? And then you have to explain what that is, and people are going to come in Discord and say, which one should I pick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's better to just say, okay, enter a password, start mining, and
Yep.
then that's technically 2 clicks. But the next time you boot up your machine, there's 0 clicks, so that evens it out.
Yep. And I think so. Maybe one-click miner 2.0 actually becomes like one-click miner advanced, where we can have some of those options and stuff. But even at that point, it's like, why aren't you just if you're at that level of an advanced user.
That was the whole philosophy behind it. So if you're as advanced as someone who needs to choose between open and closed source, someone who wants to enable which GPUs are mining and which GPUs are not mining, so that you can use that one to game, or you can use that one to mine another coin.
Yeah.
If you're that advanced, then just use the command line and make batch files and stuff. Like, yeah, there might still be features worth to include in the one-click miner. For instance, one debate that we had was the dependency on Insight, whether it should contain like a lightweight full node that you can still use to do it on your own without needing Insight. It's interesting. It's a lot of work. But it could be a thing. Another thing which is easier is, like, if you depend on Insight and it's down, don't show like expected returns infinite and amount of coins in wallet 0, but just show Insight's down, check back later.
Yeah.
Which saves a lot of people panicking about losing their coins, because obviously the coins aren't gone, but as the UI shows 0.00, people start to freak out, which is understandable.
Exactly,
So
and it's because they just don't know. Remember, the target audience is people that are new. They
yeah,
don't
right.
even know what insight is, right?
No, they haven't. Yeah, that's and they shouldn't have to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the whole idea of OneClick Miner is introduce people to mining without needing to install a full wallet and everything. So hopefully it's an entry into like the community and people start asking questions like, hey, how does mining even work? Or how, like, what's a wallet? Where should I keep a wallet? Like, and then it's an entry into understanding the whole space. And like everybody needs an entry point. Like for me,
Exactly.
because I was a developer, my entry point was like talking to the developers and say, hey, is there something I can do? But yeah, if you're a user and you just want to learn how this stuff works, then this might be a fun entry into it. So what I would say is, if anyone has ideas about what we could improve about the OneClick Miner, there's a GitHub repo on GitHub /Vertcoin project /OneClick Miner vnext.
Mm-hmm.
There's an issue list. You can just add an issue. So if you have a brilliant idea, just make an issue. We can discuss it and then see whether it's worth implementing. If you are able to develop it yourself, even better, make a pull request and I can just include it if I think it's a good idea.
But
So
keep
yeah,
it, if when you're thinking about these ideas, remember the philosophy around this product.
yeah,
Usability, ease of use, entry level person. So if you're wanting to do some really advanced stuff, it's not the place for it. It's not that we want to turn away ideas, but we have a vision for the OneClick Miner, and that's you got to keep that in mind whenever you're putting out things, because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And at the end of the day, we have to remember who our target audience is for this. And I would charge everybody that's listening to us, now that this is now in its final release, I would advise you or implore you to go and share this with your friends. People who have never mined before, people who have, they may have talked about the cryptocurrency stuff in the past with you, or there may have been some discussion. Take this to them and say, hey, do you just want to try this out? Do you just want to see kind of what it's like? Download this and you can start mining right away. This is the best way to get somebody in, and I would charge everybody who's listening to do that. Let us know your feedback. Let us know how the people in your life that you've showed this to, how they received it. What were their thoughts on it? Because while we can, we're getting feedback inside of our Discord, but that's normally the more hardcore user base and fan of Vertcoin is going to be in our Discord. It's not the average, person that's got a gaming computer or something of that nature and they want to actually try mining. So let us know that feedback. We'd love to hear that in Discord. So
yeah.
the two other options I got, or the two other things I got here, is research topics to consider. So if you can just touch on this quickly, here we have multi-algo mining. And then also the Horizon info, the research that's being done as a solution for Vertcoin. So can you touch on those two real quick as to kind of the things that we're looking to start doing research on, and kind of how we're thinking about using those, or just seeing what benefits that might bring to the project?
Yeah. So like the multi-algo mining is something that's been employed by other cryptocurrencies. So there's cryptocurrencies that have multiple algorithms, and the idea behind it is that instead of trying to get rid of ASICs by making an algorithm that's not compatible with them, which has shown to be fairly impossible, but anyway, one of the ideas, and also by relying on a single algorithm, somebody takes control over X% of the hash rate of that algorithm, then obviously he can do 51% attacks and double spends. And the idea is that if you have multiple algorithms that sort of take turns in producing blocks, then somebody has to control 5 different algorithms and then control an X percentage of those algorithms in order to overtake control of the blockchain. So this has been presented as a possible way to mitigate the 51% attack factor. I think what's interesting is that somebody from the community actually made a pull request and just built an implementation of multi-algorithm into a copy of Vertcoin core. I think the discussion needs to happen, and there needs to be some fundamental research about the security properties of multi-algorithm mining. I know that there's a couple of coins that have multi-algorithm mining that have not been 51% attacked, but the mere fact that it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't happen. And if you adopt a new solution in order to get rid of a problem, you have to first make sure that it solves the problem.
Correct.
Because if it turns out that multi-algorithm blockchains are just harder to attack, and since there are easier targets like us right now, nobody attempted, or nobody made a serious effort to try and break it. I think it's important to understand the security properties of something before we adopt it. And the other option that we're pursuing, which seems easier to implement, is the thing that they use in Horizon. So what they do in Horizon is based on which blocks you've seen first, there's an exponential need for more work in order to reorg. So let's say somebody's 51% attacking Vertcoin. They start at a particular block. The normal blockchain keeps running, so people see new blocks all the time. And then all of a sudden, an attacker presents 300 alternative blocks with more work in them. Now, the idea of Horizon is that if you see a new string of blocks that would normally reorg out the block that's currently your tip, you would say, okay, because I haven't seen these blocks for so long, I require an exponential increase in the amount of work. So let's say the 300 blocks I have like 1,000 units of work. Then if I have 301 other blocks, they need like 1.01 to the power of 300 more work. So it's not that 1,001 is more. It's like you need, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000. Just because of the fact that these blocks were hidden from me, I just trust it, and I'll just require you to have more work. Assuming that if it's an honest chain and I was just not looking at the right one, then all these miners will continue to build on this chain, and at some point it will have enough work for me to accept it, even with this additional work requirement. Now, also here, it's important to understand the exact properties. There are some concerns about an attacker, for instance, mining 2 alternate chains, which have enough work, and then publish them to like a split of the network. So 50% of the network gets one alternative chain and 50% gets another. They would never agree with each other because like they say, no, you need more work. No, you need more work. So then you have a network split. And then the question is, how are you going to resolve it? Then obviously in the end, the miners will mine on top of the chain that they think is the right one, and it will merge at some point. But that could take like days. Using this methodology, it could take days for the network to come, and that's not something that you would want. So we need to understand this better. Maybe run some simulations like that. I don't know. But the important thing is, unless we fully understand what something does, we're not going to implement it just because somebody else did.
Exactly. One of the questions we did get here was, wouldn't multi-algorithms just make it less profitable to mine?
That's a good question. I think what it would result in is that obviously you would surrender one or more of the algorithms to ASICs to say, okay, ASICs are more powerful. They're harder to exploit using rental markets because, depending on the algorithm that you choose, obviously. Because like choosing an algorithm that's dominated by another blockchain. Let's say we choose SHA-256 for one, and nobody's really interested in mining Vertcoin because the only thing you can get is like 1/5 of the total emission that we have, which is not in dollar amounts, not that much. Then as much as you surrender to different hardware classes, there's obviously a problem that the GPUs have either one or two algorithms that they're stuck with. And so, like, if you would have 2 out of 5 being GPU algorithms and half of the miners choose one and half choose the other, then you still have 40% of what you used to have. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you surrender things to ASICs or to CPU mining and people can get, like, they don't have the CPUs or whatever, then the emission is going to decrease, but the profitability is obviously dependent on the amount of people that mine. So if the emission is so low that people say, screw this, I'm going to mine something else, then there's more left for people who stay mining Vertcoin. Like, there's an equilibrium between the profitability of mining and the emission. But yeah, it's clear that if, assuming all miners stay, and assuming all miners only have GPUs and they're going to mine the parts of, like, the algorithms that support it, and they're not all 5, then obviously there's going to be a part of the rewards set aside for other algorithms that our users can't mine. So that's also, that's also something to consider, whether that's something you want.
Yeah, I think that's why this is a research topic, because simply just saying we use multi-algo mining and just throw it in there and go, it's like, well, there's all these other factors that we want to make sure that we cover, and that are we don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater to have, to not have a better expression to do. But, it's one of those things we just want to make sure that if we implement something, so be it Horizon, be it multi-algo, or be it something else that's currently not on our radar, we want to look at every path and really just war game that and hit it from every direction, just to make sure if it's a suitable, injection of code or processes into our current setup.
And there's another aspect that's important when you make upgrades like this, is the fact that the upgrades stay with you forever.
Yep.
So if you make a particular choice, like, let's say we would implement multi-algo mining, and then at some point we decide, this was not the right choice. There's no way of going back, because these blocks exist. Like, we cannot revert them, we cannot get rid of them and just produce new ones. So that means that the multi-algo mining will stay in our code base for eternity, because in order for somebody to bootstrap the network, they have to pass these blocks that require multi-algo, so the code will stay in there. Mm-hmm. So, like, script is still in there, Lyra 2 Rev 2 is still in there, Lyra 2 Rev 3 will stay in there forever, because, once there's blocks that use this new system, the system will have to be supported forever. And that was also the reason why we were very careful about the earlier iteration of Vertex, which eliminate SPV. It meant it would eliminate SPV forever, because if there's, like, these few blocks that you cannot properly validate, because you cannot validate the headers without the full block data, that was the design back then, you eliminate light clients forever. And that was a very big thing, and that's why we were very careful, and in the end decided not to. Maybe people think that this is slow and boring, and why aren't these guys incorporating all this cool stuff? Because, like, the 51% attack is already solved. Like, use, I don't know, Komodo, or use reorg limits, or the way other people fixed it. But yeah, maybe we're picky, I don't know, but yeah.
we're thinking well down the road.
We feel like there's something wrong with them, and, like, we prefer telling everyone, okay, be aware of the problem we have, we're trying to fix it still, instead of saying, okay, it's fixed, and then at some point it turns out that there's, like, a huge problem.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is we're very very proactive in monitoring of the block of our blockchain, so that if we see, and our community as well, I mean, hats off to the mining community that's in our Discord and stuff of that nature. If they see anything that's outside of the norm, they raise red flags, and then we communicate with exchange. I mean, there's pretty much a rapid response, team that we have basically set up voluntarily to communicate if there are problems or things outside of the norm, so that if we do see something like this, we're able to do our best from a decentralized perspective to eliminate any sort of damage that may happen. But in the meantime, we're still trying to figure out a solution that works long term. We're not trying to find a solution that works tomorrow. We're trying to find a solution that's going to work forever, because like he was saying, it's once it's in, it's in. There's no necessary going back. You basically have to start over from the beginning, and that's not what we want to do. That's the whole point of blockchain, is it's a continual chain of blocks with all the data is always there forever. And we did have a question, because Bitcoin, or the problem with Bitcoin, since almost 50% of the hash rate is in China, if they wanted to, they could just attack it, and not such high investment. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that we've talked about in previous Vertcoin Talk episodes, is that there's a high concentration of the hash power for Bitcoin is in China. It's controlled by very few people. I mean, we saw when there was a big hack that happened, and I know CZ at Binance had consulted with like less than 10 people on possibly rolling back the Bitcoin network. That's a 51% attack. You're rolling it back, and it was as easy as having a conversation with a small handful of people in order to see about doing that. And it really kind of went under the radar. I think a lot of people at the time that were paying attention, they raised a little bit of fuss about it, but because it didn't happen, it really didn't catch the greater crypto community abroad. That things that have happened to us can easily happen to Bitcoin. It's just a matter of who controls the power right now, the hash power in Bitcoin. They just haven't done it yet. So
yeah, partly true, but there's also there's a lot of research happening into work, and also people are still trying to understand proof and the incentive system, and why miners don't attack it, because as you said, there's a handful of miners, or in terms of Bitcoin, there's 5 or 6 mining pools that control 70% of the hash rate. So if they would collude together, they could easily do something. Not even starting about the minority SHA-256 chains like Bitcoin Cash, who's at 1% of the bit. One mining pool in Bitcoin can easily overtake the network of Bitcoin Cash if they wanted to, but they're not doing it. And there's more reasons, there's more incentive systems that we still don't understand entirely as to why this works. But it's important to understand. So also here, it's the fact that it works doesn't, the fact that it worked the past 10 years gives you a great confidence about that it can work, and that probably there's a reason that it works. But if you can, you need to be able to argue why it works. And you need to be able to prove that the system works because there's an equilibrium of incentives. And you don't want to have the situation where everybody says, yeah, okay, right, all these dollars and euros, we're done with it. We're going to shove all the money in Bitcoin. And then instead of 200 billion, there's 200 trillion in there. And then it turns out that the incentives are not compatible. It's just nobody was interested in breaking it because all the actors were actually pro Bitcoin. And similarly, the people that mine Bitcoin also have hardware that is profitable when it's mining Bitcoin. So if they attack Bitcoin, they also attack their own profitability, because they bought mining hardware. They have to run it for 1 year to recoup the investment, and then another year to make profit. If they break it, there's more happening there. Where for GPU mined coins, the problem is that if you break one chain, you still have a GPU. You can mine another one. Mm-hmm. And so that's the argument pro ASICs, where they say, okay, because the hardware can only mine this coin, it doesn't make sense to attack it because you'll break the hardware. You don't So I understand that, okay, having the power in control of a few people is scary and you don't want it. But people colluding to bring Bitcoin down is possible, obviously. And yes, but not because they're all in China that they're controlled by the same person. I don't know. I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I think there's I think the heart of the question was basically that because of China being the, a communist party, basically they could come in and just overtake, all of these businesses and stuff of that nature, or if they shut down. There's plenty of different things that could happen in that sense. It's definitely a situation where geographically it's not decentralized. There is, a lot of concentrated hash power there, but that also goes to cost of manufacturing and the ability to pay people next to nothing in order to work. And, there's a lot of factors there that go into that. But
there's a lot of factors. I think it's also very clear that industrial mining centralizes around places where power is cheap, because that's your main expenditure. So, it's a nice idea to have mining distributed all over the world, but in reality, if a country where you pay 25 cents per kilowatt hour and there's a country where you pay 6, and you have to set up an industrial I'm not talking about the home miners, right? The people that we're trying to reach with the OneClick Miner, they're mined just for fun. And if 1 million people mine for fun, we have a fairly significant hash rate. But how are we going to reach them, right? So, large, I don't see large mining farms mining Vertcoin, because there's way more profitable coins out there for them to mine. And they're probably going to be there where the power is cheap, so either next to a hydro plant, or in China where they still burn coal, or next to other power stations, or in countries where they don't have high taxes on using electricity like they have here in Europe. So but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that, I don't know. Yeah, it's there can also be Dutch people who run mining farms in other countries where the power is cheap. It doesn't mean that the mining is centralized in that country. Yeah, it depends on how much actors have control over the mining. But I agree. Most of the hardware is being manufactured in China, and that's what it is.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking about all of those different development items that we talked about here on this show. I'm going to go in here real quick because we're already... how long have we been going now? So this is an hour and 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and get ready to wrap this up. I'll talk about the marketing aspect of things here real quick. So we did our last Vertcoin talk at the beginning of the year. We did a year in review of 2019. Do recall that we are doing this now quarterly. So we're not doing it once a month. So you'll see this is our development update for Q1, but you'll see the next one in Q2. So roughly June, July. So you'll see that next broadcast then. Did want to talk about the Vertcoin Foundation IRS update. So we did get our denial letter from the IRS for the 501c3. So now we have to figure out what our options are as far as moving forward. We have the ability to do a 501c6 here in the United States, which is still a nonprofit status, but it's not a charity nonprofit where people here in the United States aren't able to donate to it and then write that off on your taxes. So that's one option. And then we have another option of possibly setting up the foundation in a different country, such as the Netherlands or something of that nature. So we're going to look at what our options are there and kind of what the best move is for the foundation. If you guys have any feedback on that or any suggestions, please let us know in the Discord.
I think the important, the most important factor of having the foundation was we don't want to be slapped with taxes if people donate Vertcoin and then it goes up in value and we have to pay the difference as soon as we buy something with it. The being able to deduct gifts from your taxes was always secondary. The first was to be exempt from equity increase tax. No, I don't know.
Income tax.
The tax of the
capital
value
gains.
of assets. Capital gains, right?
Yeah.
So because that's we expect to have a set of donations in the foundation, and if the value it's not a very stable asset right now, it fluctuates, and so if we continuously have to pay taxes when it goes up, but we don't get them back when they go down, we're burning money by that's
exactly.
Stupid. So that's why we're trying to chase a place to set up the foundation where we don't have this problem. But the easiest route was blocked out by the IRS. So let's see.
Yeah, and it was also there's most of your crypto foundations are not in the United States because it's more stringent as far as the regulations to even get the status. So we figured we'd aim high first. And then we're going to go from there and see what our next options are with that. So just know that that is still currently in development there. We did remove the donate page from the website. It's still, if you go to vertcoin.org/donate, you can still go to it. But this was one of the key things that came back from the IRS was the fact that we were already accepting donations, even though we were not a nonprofit entity. So one of the things that we're going to do is that we're actually going to shift our donation model. Instead of just having a generic pool for development donations, marketing, tip jar, and stuff of that nature. Those addresses are still there. If you want to donate to them, that's fine. But we're actually going to move to more of what we did with the OneClick Miner, where we actually set up a bounty, or in the case once we get to a nonprofit status, this will be considered a grant. So basically, a grant bounty where you are putting out a sum of funds in order to get a particular amount of work done. So say for the case of the OneClick Miner, we had a goal to raise a certain amount in order to do it. We had a proposal from Eurojap on what that would look like, so we had a kind of an idea of what the software was going to look like before we even get started. Raise the funds, and then we start building it once those funds come in. So instead of just having a generic pool there, then we will have these application-specific donation options. So you're going to start seeing that rolled out from us. Now, those funds that were donated to the generic pools, those are still there. You can check on them. If they get used, we alert you about that. Those funds will still be used in order to, pay for hosting of servers, to pay for the website, to pay for the general maintenance cost, the legal paperwork that we have to do for the foundation and stuff. All of those general maintenance costs will still be pulled from those pools. And then once we run out of those, then we'll do, we need to pay for, business licenses and stuff of that nature, or nonprofit filings. We'll create those on a per application basis moving forward. So, and then we also just wanted to anybody that wants to help with marketing, and by marketing I mean creating incentives to spread messaging, marketing banners, just generally talking to people. If you want to go on another podcast or you want to go on another show and then talk about Vertcoin, by all means come into our Discord and join the marketing channel, and let us know what you would like to take on. We did want to spotlight some exchanges here. So these are some a few exchanges that now support Vertcoin. Obviously, this is not an exchange endorsement. Do this at your own risk, but we had those links in there as well. And then some other resource links there at the bottom. And that's pretty much it for the developer update. Let's see if we have any other questions. We didn't have any other questions come in that meantime. Any final thoughts or anything like that before we wrap up this talk for today?
No, not really. I think the VertHash stuff is looking good in the sense that the core wallet is updated, at least in the GitHub repo, so people can look at it. Feel free to ask questions if you don't understand what it does. Feel free to test it out. Same goes for the OneClick Miner. If you have any questions, just we're very at least I think we're very approachable. So if people ask us questions, in general, I would answer them. And yeah, I think it's cool if people use this and try, indeed, what you said, try to have people who aren't into cryptocurrency communities try to install this. Well, it's not even installing, it's just running, but still. Try to run this and give feedback on how because the target audience is different from the people that we normally have test our software. There are people that understand what this thing does and how GPU drivers work and stuff like that. So having someone that's not entirely computer illiterate, but still does gaming or something like that, see if they're able to start mining, that would be super helpful to get insights on how that experience is. And if this is really an improvement, because if people still think it's too complex, then I don't know. We have to double down on making it easier. So,
we did have one question come in. Is the OneClick Miner completely translated, or did we add some stuff that needs translating?
It's translated into, I think, 16 something languages. Let me pull it up here, see if I can. But it's, yeah, I used to have a translation bounty. Like I would give everyone who does a translation a couple of Vertcoins, like 10 Vertcoins or something. I like at some point we got translations of fairly niche languages, um, while we were still missing like French or Spanish or things like that. Um, I think I think we can reach about 5 billion people now with these translations. So I welcome any pull requests for more languages. If you feel like I want to have this in my native language, you can make a pull request. I think there's either a guide on the GitHub on how to do it, or you can just come to the Discord and I'll explain how it works. It's just translating one file, and you'll have a version of OneClick Miner in your native language. So if you think that's cool, then obviously I'll just merge it in. But I think most of the important languages are there.
Okay.
Now.
Awesome. Yeah, and then did have a note about NiceHash has an exchange now, so maybe they'll start monitoring blockchains on their own in order to avoid tax on themselves. That I don't know what is going to be happening as far as NiceHash having an exchange. I haven't necessarily looked into it. Have you looked into that at all, or is it pretty much kind of just new?
No, I don't use exchanges that much.
I understand that completely.
And I don't use NiceHash as much. So,
yeah. Okay. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us here today on this episode of Vertcoin Talk. And like I said, you'll see the next one pop up around July. So the beginning of July, that'll be the end of Q2. Just want to thank everybody for joining us here today, and we will see you guys in the next one. Thanks.